It is said that there are 9 arts. And what if video games is the 10th? You're listening to The 10th Art, a podcast series about the place of video games in entertainment, culture, and society. Playing a game is often about interacting with the virtual world, and many players like to pause the action, take a step back, and snap some pictures. A perfect action shot, a breathtaking landscape, an enthralling portrait, or maybe just a silly interaction to share with your friends. Players want to capture the moment and, yes, make some art. Ubisoft is currently hosting a global contest for players, photographers, and artists to submit their most creative in-game photos. It's called Photomode, and submissions are open right now. There's even going to be an exhibition of the winners in New York City. To celebrate this contest, on this episode of The 10th Art, we want to interrogate the relationship between photography and video games, the ways in which players are making art, and how artists can get inspired by games. I'm joined today by one of the contest jury members, Mélanie Courtinat, who's a French immersive artist. Hello, Mélanie. Thank you for joining us today.
Hello.
And I'm joined as well by Fawzi Mesmar, who's VP Editorial at Ubisoft. He's also a games educator and an industry veteran. Hello, Fawzi. Thank you for joining us.
Hello. Thank you for having me. What an introduction.
Well, it was a very short introduction. I know you've done many more things in the world of video games, and hopefully we can touch on some of those during our conversation. So it's a pleasure to be with you both today. And since, we're doing this in the context of this Photomode contest, I wanted to start with just a question for both of you. What's your relationship with photomodes in games, with taking pictures in video games? And maybe if we can start by just sharing even like the first time that you took a picture in a video game. Maybe Mélanie, we can start with you. Do you remember your first time taking a picture in a game?
I think so. I think probably my first time would be when screenshots in game weren't quite a thing. So I took my digital camera and took a picture of the screen of an RPG I was playing called Tales of Symphonia. And at this time, it was on GameCube. I remember I was playing the game while not knowing the gameplay mechanism, and there was like a poem on a temple which stated something like, "The giants in the wind are looking at the east." Something that I found really, really beautiful. And as I wasn't aware of gameplay mechanism and how things work, I didn't understood at the time that this meant you literally just have to solve a puzzle by making a statue of a giant look at the east or something like this. And so I would look at the picture and read the words again and again and be like, what does this mystery means? What is it?
So for you, it was kind of a way to make the game last longer, like bring that gameplay element into your life and kind of sit with it for longer than the gameplay period. Yes,
I didn't even have a smartphone or a phone at this time. I just had my dad's digital camera. So I would go in my bed at night and re-roll and look at the pics I took. Beautiful pictures, so that's sure.
And what about you, Fawzi? Do you have an early memory or first memory of taking pictures in games?
I do, actually. It's quite a nerdy story, if I may add as well. So when I was younger, maybe like around junior high, like elementary school to junior high, like that era, I used to do this nerdy thing. I was like, whenever I finish a video game, I would replay it again and then write a walkthrough of that video game by hand on a school notebook. And then I give it to the other kids in class to help them finish the game. So that was like, a pre-internet era. So instead of you looking stuff up online, you would wait until I finished the game and then actually physically write the walkthrough with a pen. And then start to give it to the kids in class, and they will give it to each other.
One copy, of course, was circulating for each walkthrough.
It's only the one copy, because I was busy making my second walkthrough for whatever other game I was playing. And this is like maybe a sideline, but actually making one of those is how I discovered what game design is and how I want to be a game designer. So like I was writing the walkthrough for the first Resident Evil. Mm-hmm. And then I was tracing the map, like the of the mansion, saying like, you need to go to this room. This room has a key that will open the door for this other room. So I was like, playing with the controller, moving around, and then like drawing what I'm seeing on the notebook. And that's when I realized that somebody else just had drawn that from their imagination. I was tracing what I'm seeing, but somebody else imagined all of this. And that's when I realized what game design is. I was like, this is the job for me, this is the best job in the world. But that's a tangent. So like I was writing one of those walkthrough notebooks, and I was doing one for King of Fighters. I think it was 94 or 95. So like one of like the early King of Fighters. And I wanted to putting the move list for every one of those characters and like some basic combos. But I thought it would be really cool, almost like a magazine, if I could also have pictures.
Of course.
In that notebook. So I would run the game on an emulator, do the move, and then they quickly take a screenshot and then print that screenshot on our printer, which drove my dad crazy because ink was very expensive. And we used to run out like very quickly. So I would print that and then cut it with a scissor and then use duct tape to, like the transparent duct tape to actually tape that picture onto the notebook next to the moves. And then give it to the other kids in class so that they can play King of Fighters. So I think like that was like the first like screenshot I've taken of a game to use in that way. I still have that notebook, actually.
Oh, really? It's quite interesting because for Mélanie, it was kind of like almost a poetic thing of like sitting with the moment and decrypting the game. And for you, it was really almost like practical, right? Of like being able to show your friends what moves in your walkthrough, what the moves look like.
It's funny, like I've always wanted to help people play video games ever since I was a kid. So it's like it ended up translating into a career.
I know for you, of course, Mélanie, you're a visual artist that uses game engines and video games quite a bit. So what's your relationship now with that fact of like snapping a still shot inside a game or inside a game engine?
I use in-game photography a lot in my own projects, actually. Because I really like the fact that being a creator of these immersive worlds using things like Unity or Unreal, I create the whole set, the whole level design, and I make only a small part available to the public, to the players. But me, myself, designing this whole thing, I really think that there are points of view a bit hidden that are quite interesting. So sometimes when I finish a project, I will reopen the files themselves and change the camera from something with physics to something with like flying mode. And I just go around, I get rid of the colliders and I just travel inside my own world, and I usually go up and like on top of a tower I can look down at what things look like and find new horizons, new point of view. And this is where I will take the picture, like the rare picture, the forbidden one, the one I'm only able to see. And I will share this.
But in this case, it might be a world or a level or a game that you designed. Like, are you surprised sometimes by what you find?
Yes. Yeah. Even if I design by having some kind of God mode where you can do like a model, where you will paint the textures on the terrain, etc., add your lights. But if you change the camera, you go, for example, you change your size, you go really, really small or really, really big, allows you to see things that you wouldn't, even as a creator of a level, you wouldn't know it was there before.
Super interesting. And what about you, Fawzi? Do you still, use photo modes in games or take in-game photography? What's your relationship with that form of user-generated content today?
Yeah, I do. I think for me, I'm way less artistic in that approach, because I'm a lot more like now. Like when I'm using photo mode on games that are out, I'm mostly taking goofy photos to share with friends.
Yeah.
Or like, trying to put myself in the most ridiculous situation or my character and send it over to my friends and look what I've done. I think like a recent example I could think about is that I just had the most ridiculous looking build in Elden Ring. And it's just like, none of the pieces actually match at all. And there's like, a giant turtle behind me. And I'm like, taking photos of that, sending that over to friends of mine, going like, yeah, well, I get the best stats, so stats before looks or something like that.
I disagree.
Yeah, you agree.
Looks first in Elden Ring. I have to find my character beautiful and well dressed and attractive, else I don't want to play it with the big headset like this. No.
Yeah, I know, it drove me crazy. Like, I'm not completely like blind to aesthetics. At least I hope not. But like, I was playing a samurai, so like I like that all the pieces of the samurai fit. But then I found this helmet that is like 3 times the length of my head, and it's +5. What am I supposed to do?
You couldn't resist that +5.
Yeah.
So it's a samurai with a giraffe head almost, but it's +5.
But do you need the +5 in the end? Can't you just like get good to the point that you don't
That's
even
true.
need that? You can have both the looks and the skills.
That's true. Even the stats didn't help me in being massacred in that game. So clearly I need to get good, but I was trying to find excuses.
I think what Fawzi is saying is really interesting. I think for a lot of people, sharing in-game pictures is about that social aspect, right? Like sharing an experience, especially for a single-player game, sharing an experience that you're having alone with your friends, like representing a moment that's only with yourself, but then when you capture it, you can kind of share it then with other people and say, hey, this has been my experience in the game. Do you think does that ring true to you?
Yeah. If we stay on the subject of Elden Ring, I would myself take in-game photography, but super first degree, being like, this is my beautiful character on top of a mountain with the whole horizon, and I will send it to my friends, being like, hey, have you seen this part yet? It's so beautiful. So it was sort of a selfie, even. It was more related to the practice of selfie, being like, this is me looking good in a good place. Then, for me as well, than taking pictures of things onto the game.
Right.
Also, I took pictures with my friend when we connected with Elden Ring. It was one of the first multiplayer experience I enjoyed. I really, really, really enjoy the multiplayer side of the game. Mm-hmm. And we will meet when the game came out. Me and my best friend bought it the same day the day it came out. And we will play every night together and just gather at some beautiful places and just make our character like sit down in a cute pose and chat about real life events about our day, and took pictures of just us looking super pretty. But like selfies.
Yeah, that's been a huge part of, for other games, like for example, Animal Crossing during confinement, right? A lot of people's experience with that game was hanging out on people's islands, taking pictures of the beautiful decorations and the beautiful setups that they had on their islands or their beautiful characters.
Yeah, and showing off the clothes they would have designed. Exactly. Or copy real-life designers' pieces to wear it online as well.
Now, I have a more practical question for you, Fawzi, because Mélanie mentioned earlier that she would take pictures of the worlds and the levels that she created in game engines, and from a game design perspective, I've always wondered, do game designers create sometimes worlds or levels in a way that they will be beautiful to take pictures of, or is that kind of at the back of their mind sometimes in development teams to create essentially opportunities to take pictures?
Absolutely. And a lot of those moments also, you can see that within the game's framework, the camera will almost pan to the site that you're supposed to see.
Right.
In many ways, like there are moments in a lot of the games, and you could probably relate to some of them. Like even I know that it's done for that in mind. I will still take a screenshot just because it's an awe-inspiring moment.
Right.
And it's there are moments in which you're supposed to feel like a tourist in a game, like you're in front of like a magnificent landscape, or like a great reveal has been presented to you for the first time, or like your character has just realized the size or the depth of the adventure that they're about to embark on, and those moments are like carefully crafted to present that to the player, and the shot that is often either suggested or panned or guided to you is designed to convey that emotion. And we see that a lot of times, like with those kinds of moments, the players will tend to take the screenshot going like, I can't believe, how magnificent the Vesta is, or view. You might have experienced that, like, for example, playing a game like Tomb Raider, climbing on a cliff, then suddenly it's side view and you're seeing the vista on the horizon, for example. Or in Final Fantasy, the 7 remake, a recent example for me was hit all the nostalgia buttons. But when you see the big city for the first time, or like the first time you get up in the morning out of the bar and now you see the slums in daylight and you can clearly see the ceiling, which is the bottom of the sectors. The camera even pans in that direction to go like, look at like the magnificence of this place.
Yeah.
And you feel inside, even sometimes you would say it out loud, like, whoa, this is cool,
Well, it's reminding me of Skyrim, where I don't think the camera pans sometimes, but when you arrive in certain locations, your character, or if you have a character following you, they'll say, wow, right?
Yeah.
Kind of like try to trigger that moment in the player. I don't know if you remember that.
It triggers you to be almost like a tourist, to go like, wow, that's such an incredible moment. I need to immortalize that in some way. And that's like, when taking a picture could be the first thing that comes to mind.
It reminds me of a speculative project. I think it's called Camera Obscura. And it's the idea of having a camera that whenever you take a picture of, as a tourist, of a monument, of something quite famous, it goes, before you take the picture, it goes searching on Google Images for the same shot. And if the camera recognizes that the picture you're about to take has been taken like hundreds, thousands of times, more than X numbers of time, it prevents you from taking the picture.
Wow.
Because no one needs one more picture of the Eiffel Tower.
Well, yeah. Is there ways of encouraging players to go off the beaten track, as it were, to kind of like encourage them to maybe take pictures of things that are a little bit less obvious or more creative, or based even more on their interactions of the world rather than those vistas or panoramas that are crafted to be represented that way?
Yeah. I think there's a direct relationship between like how willing the player is to take a photo of part of their experience with the depth of their experience itself. So like, I found that my theory is that like, the more that you like a game and the more that you want to take photos to kind of like keep those memories of your connection with that game, or like that game world, or the events that transpired in that game. And kind of like that mimics photography, like, why we take photos generally in real life. There's this wonderful book I read this year, actually, called On Photography by Susan Sontag. It's a wonderful book, and it's oddly enough a book about photography that doesn't have a single photo in it. And it's mostly looking into what is this mysterious thing that makes people want to take photos. So it's a bit like a philosophical approach of why photography is being taken. And amongst the things Susan mentions in that book is that it's about immortalizing that moment in time, or like that something is so precious to you that it feels bad that it's fleeting, that it's gonna go, and you feel like I need to keep this somehow. And photography is one of the methods in which you can do that, something that you can look back on and reminisce or try to relive that moment, or the closest thing that we can get to reliving that moment, which I thought rang very true to me.
It reminds me of the feeling of wanting to save your game at some point. When you're in real life and you really like the place you are, you wish, as you said, you wish you could be there for relive this moment in time, and so you will take a picture, and taking this picture is the closest thing you will have of saving something.
And I find it very cool that like we can have those kind of very human experiences now within the virtual world of video games, especially that we spend so much time in those virtual worlds as well. And they still have that same kind of value to us. It's like, where some people met friends, some people had magical moments. And, like even with real life friends, we still reminisce about a gaming moment that we've had maybe 10, 15 years. That one time in which we were all supposed to be behind a wall, but one of my friends just ventured in and got killed immediately, or something like that. It's still one of the stuff that we would joke around, even though it's an in-game moment. So, in-game photography is becoming one of those ways, and in the same vein, taking videos as well, of kind of like immortalizing those experiences in some way.
Fawzi?
Yeah.
I was curious about what you said a bit earlier, being like you really enjoy the fact that some player like your game so much that I want to take pictures inside it. What do you think about the practice of modding your games by the players?
I love that as well. For me as a creator, like there are complications on like how the mods are being used and if they're being used commercially and all of that stuff. That's a more complicated discussion. But being a game creator myself, to see people inspired by the work that I'm doing, that they want to make it better or different or otherwise, that for me is maybe one of the highest forms of flattery, that I can get.
Yeah.
And it makes me so happy to see communities engage in the games that I work on in that way. And in fact, actually, like there were mod makers that were working on stuff in games that I was involved in that ended up being colleagues. Because like they've made such incredible mods that we thought we got to get these guys in and like get them to help us make the games, or like we've had people that are just modding or like creating levels or maps, just fan made maps that were becoming so popular, and go like, oh, we need to get those peeps in and help us make maps better, So for me, like the active engagement in with the community is one of like. It's inspiring for me personally, and usually like whatever game I'm working on, I am following all the in-game photographers, the people that are making Lego recreations of our game. It's hard. It's why we do this stuff. It's heartwarming.
I agree with you. It's a beautiful way of them expressing their love. I mean, they love the game so much that I want to add things to make it better for them, so they will like it even more. How nice!
It's a way of making it their own, also of reinterpreting it and adding their own flavor to it.
Even if it wasn't criticism, so if they're like doing something to make fun of the game, for me, I also like that a lot, because in my eyes, that this is somebody that cares enough to spend all that time to create that criticism. Hopefully, for one of us to see it and maybe make adjustments or improvements.
Well, it's nice to know that as a creator, you're keeping an open mind and staying open to that feedback from the community and from players, even if it's not always communicated in the most respectful way.
Mm.
As any creator, Mélanie, maybe you can, I'd love to hear your perspective on this as well. When you make something and you put it out there, you are, by extension, making yourself vulnerable,
Yeah.
And it's part of it. It's part of the creation process, in which like the vulnerability is an important part of it. As you're making yourself vulnerable towards criticism and flattery, you also allow room for inspiring others to hopefully either build on the thing that you're making, or dissing it so that they can make something better. But the vulnerability is it's an extension of what we do. Because like there's no point of creating something and then only I could see it,
Yeah. I mean, sometimes for the practice of in-game photography, sometimes I take pictures for me and for the real life photography as well, because I just want to remember the moment. But when I create something that's more than just screenshotting my player, more than just taking a quick selfie or landscape picture, it's true that I do want people to see it, even if that means I'm gonna get judged, which could be quite scary for creators and for game makers as well. It's scary to put your whole heart on Steam on each. Yeah, I'm thinking about indie players, but in bigger teams as well. Even if you're a little bit protected, perhaps by big names or big teams, it's still a part of you that you put outside.
Now, the thing that's really special about in-game photography is that it's also evolving with the technology as games, become more photorealistic and have more features. And now players are really adding their own creative input when they're taking pictures in games with photo modes, right? Developers have developed these, essentially it's replicating real-life photography where you can change the lighting, you can change the depth of field, the focus. I think you can even change the weather sometimes, add filters, add effects. So that's like an additional way that players can kind of input their own creativity and put their stamp on those moments that you're talking about. And I'm just wondering, what's your position about this? Is this art that they're creating? How is this affecting the relationship between art and video games? It's a deep question that's getting a silence from our speakers.
Is this art? It's always hard to give an answer to if something is art or not. We could go further and ask, are video games art? Which is like the basic question. So is in-game photography art? I would tend to say that it's at least a form of creation, and that I really enjoy the fact that developers are giving players some more tools to appreciate in their own way the game, because photo modes are never like a gameplay mechanism. Like, you don't need a photo mode to finish the game, but if you want to, you can take the time to really create images with your personality, your frame, and then be able to understand the game and live it in your own personal way, which I really like.
From my point of view, I think as long as it's a creation with expression. So for me, there is artistic merit to it for sure. Also, there is an element of craftsmanship in choosing the moment, choosing the timing, choosing a lot of extra tools and elements that more sophisticated game modes are giving out to players to enhance that self-expression. So as long as it's within that expression, there's expressionism within it.
Yeah.
Therefore, there has to be artistic merit to it as well, and it's something that applies to any form of expression.
Yeah, and touching on what you're saying, Fawzi, I think what's really interesting is again, it's one of those emergent gameplay things that, as Mélanie said, is optional, and it's developers putting tools in the hands of players, and then players go wild with it, right? The pictures, of course, that the players will take, developers can't plan for those. So it's really creating a set of rules and a set of techniques and templates that players can then kind of do whatever they want with and get creative and do things that were not planned originally.
Yeah, it's not like it's part of the gameplay, the core gameplay, like Life is Strange. I really like the fact that it's optional, because as in real life, it's rare when you feel pressure to take a picture. And so it's really going to be depending on the player's will.
Unless you're playing Pokemon Snap on Nintendo 64.
Which you can score games.
The whole point was to take pictures of Pokemon.
Yeah.
There was a lot of funny pictures in that game as well. So. On the artistic merit of any medium is almost always challenged when it's first representing itself. Photography itself was challenged at first when it came up. It goes is this art? You're just pointing a machine at something and pressing a button. Mm-hmm. But as we know now, the century and change after the thing is without a doubt an artistic method of expression. So the tools are bound to constantly evolve. And I think it's interesting that now these are virtual tools within a virtual world. Try to understand the artistic merit of the thing just because of the tools it's used. I think just limiting to the value of what the thing is at its heart, human expression in a form of the tools that are available.
Mélanie, you're operating and working in the world of visual art. I'm wondering if you find around you when you interact with other artists, do you think that artists have something to learn from in-game photography or forms of creativity that are in-game, let's say?
I do. More globally, I think that contemporary artists are sometimes, I feel like there are still two sides, that there are contemporary artists that use video games engines and tools to create art, and there are at the other end of the spectrum, video games creators that create games that are considered as art by the players themselves, by their community, but that perhaps don't have a value on the art market. And it's two separate words. And I do think that if both sides were to learn a little bit more about the tools to create, like in-game photography, perhaps there could be more and more ways to reunite them together.
And do you find that, for example, brands that you've worked with or partners you've worked with, I know you've done immersive art experiences for different brands. You've done also video clips to accompany songs. Have those partners or clients kind of changed in the way that they approach or the way that they see video games, that they see game engines, that they see virtual art like the ones that you create?
I think so, because video games tools are my main form of expression. So when you hire me to create something for you, it's probably what I'm going to use. And I also really enjoy using these engines to talk about the game itself. I create some kind of meta-narratives, I think. And so I'm going to give the example of the video clip you mentioned. The last one I did was for Agar Agar, a French band, for their last song called Trouble. So I created the game with my best friend Jonathan Corinne using Unity, and the whole video clip was shooted integrally inside a world we created. We made the character, we made the word, and then we had no experience of cinematography, but we just looked at movies we liked and sort of took the shots. Like so nerdy, we took one shot we liked from Lord of the Rings and recreated it because we had the freedom with the tools that allow in Unity to shoot. It's called Cinemachine in this case. We were allowed to do real life super complicated shots, like helicopter shots or drone shots. It was super easy for us and like with no extra cost. And so we made this whole clip with a video game telling a story about a video game character. So the whole point of the video clip is to talk about the emotions of someone that is just an NPC, his pain of just being a bonus of the story and not one of the main player. And it's a story about him being trapped on an island that is far away from the main world of the game, and so no player can ever reach him.
Oh, no.
Yeah, and so he doesn't have a purpose because no player will ask him what is his side quest. So he's just lost, and as he's trapped in a video game engine, he can only die and respawn. He can't even die, so it's kind of a purgatory. And so telling the story with gaming, traditional images that looks like video game, that wasn't really what the public of the band was expecting, but we had real, honest emotions, and people come to us to tell them that they felt some true emotions, true empathy for an NPC. So yeah, to answer your question, I do think that creating this kind of immersive, emotional experiences with games allow me to perhaps change a little bit the opinion of non-gamers that hire me.
Bridge that connection sometimes.
Yeah.
Fawzi, I'm curious to know what you're thinking when you know someone like you who's a veteran in the industry, who's worked on so many games on the game design side. What do you think, or does that inspire anything in you when you hear people like Mélanie who are creating art and creating these experiences and in a way questioning kind of the how games work and how we interact with them by creating art inside a game engine like that?
I love it. It's for me, it's super inspiring. Even as a game creator, like, seeing what people can do with the game that I've worked on in a way that I don't I couldn't even imagine is one of the joys that I have in the job that I do, and one of the things I love about the industry the most is that the creativity doesn't stop at the team; it continues on in the audience and the fan bases for the game, and also in the technology that we use in the industry as well. It's extending beyond. It's the lines are getting blurred in a way that I find fascinating. You guys probably know about now. Standard movie blue screen technology, for example, is getting replaced by the use of game engines. You get things like Ford versus Ferrari or The Mandalorian getting shot in sets almost entirely based in Unreal Engine and stuff like that. There's now it's becoming almost a standard cinematic practice to utilize gaming technology in the creation of motion pictures and TV series and whatnot. It's almost like an evolution of what we started by doing, but we were telling stories within the games that providing tool sets within the games, and then people using that to tell their own stories. It's now being used to tell commercially viable stories, TV series, IPs of their own. The lines are getting blurred, and that for me is wonderful, because that could go both ways, and that presents really interesting opportunities for where our medium could go in the future.
Thank you very much, Fawzi. Thank you, Mélanie, for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Do you want to try your hand at making some art in video games? Submit to the Ubisoft Photomode contest by sharing your best shots on Instagram or Twitter with the hashtag Ubisoft Photomode. Visit ubisoft.com/photomode for contest details. There's even a free Ubisoft Plus trial going on right now, so you have a chance to play Ubisoft games for free and snap some pictures. Thank you for listening to this episode of The 10th Art. Make sure you don't miss any of our episodes as they come out. Subscribe or follow us wherever you get your podcasts. Ubisoft.com/The 10th Art Podcast.